This is the Finance Committee meeting for the City of Hudson for Monday, July 15th, 2013. First order of business is to consider the minutes of the past meeting. Is there any changes or additions that anyone would like to make?
I'll move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item is to consider claims for July 15th. You've had a chance to look at, you received those in the mail or on the internet, and you have hard copy if you want to look at them. Any questions or comments?
I'll move for approval in the amount of $365,668.45.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the operator's license. We have approval and issuance of regular operator's license for the period of 7/16/13 to 6/30/15 for Greg Larson, Dustin Holman, Kyle O'Connell, and Jared Kennedy. Ann Larson, Michael Murphy, and Scott Whitaker.
Move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next issue is the discuss and consider any action related to a 5-year financial plan that we've been talking about and the potential issuance of 2013 general obligation bonds or notes. Neil, you want to take us through that?
Sure. At the last meeting, we talked about, I believe, Randy mentioned, to look at the projects that would impact based upon the various choices, because what Eller's outlined are really three, options for funding. And what our current mill rate is based upon equalized value is 4.66 mils. And they outlined three options that would allow to issue additional debt, one of which would have gone to 5 mils, one to 5.25 mils, and one to 5.5 mils. Only under the 5.5 mils would we be able to fund the $15 million that was recommended for the public safety building. And we'll go into what some of the impacts of that are. One of the things in looking at that and using the funding schedule that was outlined by Ellers, they had planned to issue debt in 2013, 2017, then again in 2018, and presumably the 2018 debt would cover projects in 2018 and 19. So what I tried to do is I tried to look at two things. Number one, how much funding is available in those first 4 years, 13, 14, 15, 16, and then look at 13 through 19 and what would be available. And on the issue sheet, if you look at the bottom of the first page, where you can see what the differences are, and if you look at it, and if the intention would be to go forward with the public safety building within that first 4-year time frame. The initial, what came from the committee was $2 million in 2015 and then constructed in 16. If we went to the 5.5 mils, we would only have $1 million left for other projects. But then if you look over 2013 to 2019, there would be some catch-up, but still it is not as considerable. So, really, if you look at the options, in total and take a real step back, what was outlined based upon the 5 mil proposal will give us, provide for basic equipment replacement, meet our needs, and it meets most of the needs that were identified by the committees, and will increase the level for street maintenance and construction. If we went to 5.25 mils, we would have significantly more funds because the requests on and beyond the street maintenance, and it seemed like in working through what the progression would be, street maintenance was where you would either expand or contract based upon the millage. So 5.25 gives us more money for street maintenance and construction. If you went to 5.5 mils and wanted the public safety building, then what's going to end up happening is you're going to be deferring your equipment replacement, and you're also going to be reducing your street maintenance and construction, particularly within that first few years. So I think, at least in my mind, those were the trade-offs. So what I tried to do here is I tried to look at if we met the current needs or came close to meeting the current needs that were identified for 2013 and 14. I looked at what projects would be funded, and that's what's in your handout. And if we did this, what I tried to do is stay within the confines of the options that were proposed by Ellers. So under the 5 mil option, they proposed issuing debt of $6.5 million in 2013 and then again in 2017. Well, I broke that down into two issues, one of which for 13 and 14, and then the next for 15 and 16. So I'm trying to sit there and break this down where we're issuing debt, pretty much every 2 years. But I think, the real question in here is, between those three choices, what level of debt, do you find tolerable? Obviously on and beyond the tolerance for debt is, the benefits that would come from increased street maintenance or the benefits that would come from a public safety building. In terms of a timing, things are getting, a little bit late. If we could, at a minimum, if you look at, I talked to Sean Lenz from Ellers and threw together the rough schedule. If we could have a decision today in terms of what our debt tolerance is, then at the August 5 meeting, we could either approve a capital budget for 13, or we're far enough along the way and we have projects identified here, and approve a budget for 13 and 14. At the same time, what we'd probably have to do is approve a resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of bonds at that meeting. And one of the things that Sean stressed was we need to have a minimum of 30 days between when we approve the resolution and we award the bonds. Mm-hmm. Consequently, we really wouldn't be able to award the sale of any notes and bonds until the September 16 meeting. So we're not really getting money until September 16. So that's a rough time frame of what we're looking at. I gave what I thought was a decent shot in terms of projects. If you go to that first page of project listings, what I tried to do is look at it really two ways. Number one, what came from the departments, or it came from initially the departments and then the committees. And if you can see in that top section, that summary of projects by year, using the 5.25 mil scenario, it comes pretty close to mirroring the department requests in terms of what could be funded. And then in the section below that, I tried to look at project funding sources, some of which would be from the short-term capital and the general fund. The general fund savings there, the presumption would be that if we proceed with the LED street lighting project, that would be paid back through general fund savings. And then you can see, the various other sources of funding. There's always a possibility that we did not include it in here, but one of the projects included in here was the stormwater project for Buckeye Street. And we could potentially, even though that money was not budgeted for in the stormwater fund, we could probably use stormwater funds to repay the debt on that, be it over 10 years or 20 years. So that might lessen the tax burden. However, that's not going to have a significant impact, because we're looking at, repaying debt on $200,000. The other thing that in doing here, I made some assumptions that when we're selling equipment, we're going to recover about 10% on the resale of the used equipment. That's built into here. Additionally, when we do have street projects, there's an estimate of roughly 2% of that we will recover through special assessment. And that's why I'm trying to get down as close as I can to, what can we, what would really be financed and what are those other sources potentially out there. So if anybody has questions about the project or the methodology in coming up with this, I'd gladly answer those.
I've got a couple questions. If we, for example, if we did the 5.2, which I'm probably more in favor of than anything, because in talking with my constituents and the people that I've run into about service, general service in Hudson as a whole, and the storm kind of brought some things to light that maybe they did a great job for where we were and what we have, but what else could we have gone better and done better? Just hypothetical questions. But my overall question is, if we do the 5.2 and then down the road we decide to bond again,
Mm-hmm.
in between the 5 years, can we bond again for the public safety building?
Certainly.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And, and that's why I've kind of broken it down into like two-year issues. You could probably do the 5.25 right now and sit there, and depending upon if the public safety building came in considerably less, that could be rolled into, the plan here is probably every 2 years.
Okay, and then let's back that up. If we went for 5.5 and we didn't build the public safety building, are we still, that money goes back, or we are stuck with that money?
I think one of the keys here, when you issue debt, the intention is that you use the debt. If we don't use it within 2 years of issuance, we have arbitrage issues where we could potentially have to, repay the federal government for the difference between what we earned on the money and what we're paying for it. Sure. And that starts to become a little bit of a nightmare. So, I mean, the real intention is you're issuing debt to pay for projects.
Because the overall feeling I'm getting from the people I've talked to, coming back to my first part of my question, is that they're okay with somewhat of an increase. Somewhat. And I guess they're relying on us to make the smart decision about it. I don't know how everybody else feels, but 5.2 seems to be my comfortable zone, and we need to probably nail down a better public safety plan before we would bond for it.
I think that's probably a fair way to look at it. I mean, you're on public safety, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have no doubt in my mind, like we've been asking for how many years for a new public safety building, or at least a satellite.
Yep.
We do need that, but we can't just throw an arbitrary number of $15 million up there and say, that's what we need.
What is the overall impact on taxes per 100,000 for each of these? If we go from 466 to 5 and we go to 525, what?
Sure.
Is that
And
in-
I think it's
is
a good
that
point,
in-
when we talk about mills,
Yeah,
what a mill is a dollar per $1,000 of valuation.
Yep.
So if you look at the city taxpayer, and just for round numbers, let's use a $100,000 house that's valued at $100,000.
Gotta make it simple for me, yeah.
Okay?
Good luck finding
Right
one.
now, that person would be paying the city for operations and debt service $466
Per 100,000.
per 100,000.
Okay, so then it's 500 and 525 and,
Exactly.
Okay.
That's the easiest way of looking at it.
okay.
So again, if you went to the 5.5, you have a $200,000 house, now we're up to $1,100. Would that be right?
Right.
I guess that to me doesn't seem like a lot. Now, I'm no in a position, this is my personal opinion, but does it encumber, if we do the 5.5, any other borrowing capacity? I think I was questioning that when Ehlers brought it up, or
No, we have we have a fair amount of borrowing capacity.
60 million, probably, huh?
It's up there. If you look at it, we can borrow up to 70%. There's a ratio of what our
Without
debt
affecting
capacity
our
is,
credit
and right now
rating.
we are at 12-15%. So capacity is really not the issue. It's more of a tolerance for debt, because the debt has to be repaid.
exactly. But
If we went up, it may have some impact on our credit rating.
didn't he say something like that at the
Yeah.
last meeting? That if
Well,
we
but
did the
we're so low
5.5,
right now.
Right. I think right now, and I only have the statistics for the total taxes. This would include school, county, and WITC. And right now, our effective mills is 18.32, And,
Combined.
pardon? That's
Combined.
combined, that's every,
That's when we look
all-
at the average person looks at their tax bill and they see it all together.
Right,
They don't look at line items, so what we're talking about here is the city of Hudson's line item,
right,
which is very low.
right. We're 4.66 of that 18.32.
Yeah.
And I mean, if just for rough numbers in terms of comparison, River Falls is we're at 18.32, River Falls is at 21.25, New Richmond's at 24.72.
Where would it bump us if we did 5.5?
If we did 5.5, so we would be adding 0.84, so we would be 19.2,
Still
19.3.
below our average comparable city size.
Correct.
Can I just,
That includes that nobody else does
that means
anything.
no one else does anything. I think there's another way to look at it, though, and that is percentage-wise, what does that increase look like from this, just the city's perspective?
Give us the numbers
If we go from 4.66 to 5, it goes up just under 10%.
of our taxes, yeah.
Yep, we go 4.66 up to 5.25, it goes up 14%. 4.66 up to 5.5, it's 19.5%. Those are big jumps. When most people are seeing flat paychecks, or in some cases, reduced paychecks, I think we have to be really careful we don't dump something on people that, for some people, may not be a lot. For others, it's quite a bit. And it can have kind of a chilling effect on other parts of the city's economy, too. And that's, like the mayor said, that's assuming no one else is raising their taxes. That's probably fairly unlikely. We've seen some good growth in, new construction and residential. We've got New Line coming on board. You quickly, the picture changes from a building perspective and just from a real estate perspective when you start cranking the taxes up in large increments. So I'm just saying, if we could do it in a way that's a little bit more palatable and something that residents can adjust to, I'm far more in favor of that.
And the current rate for borrowing on bonds is, what is it, 3%, 2%?
A lot of it, and it's changed very, very rapidly within the past couple of weeks, that the rates have shot up. And a lot of it depends. I mean, one of the things I mentioned in the issue sheet is there are certain projects we're financing that you couldn't bond, that we would have to go with 10-year notes for, just because the useful life of those projects, is not a 20-year life. So, and then additionally, for one of the projects listed there was for HVAC improvements for City Hall, and you cannot bond for City Hall improvements without a referendum. We could issue notes for that, but you cannot bond for it. So, I mean, if you were looking at, 20-year notes right now, you're probably, over 3%. I'd probably say closer to 3.5%. And then for, but some of this will be a 10-year portion, which is, which could be, low to high 2s.
Do we have any projections, Neil, about where that rate's going to be, let's say 2 years from now? Or
I don't know if we have a good projection. I mean, from everything that, I try to follow it for the city's investments as good as I can. And, one of the things I look at is what's the difference, if you're investing something for 2 years versus 3 years or 5 years, what are people willing to pay you for that next step? And that has gone, that curve as to what they'll pay you for the next step has really taken a substantial rise. So I'm, in my view, based upon that alone, 3 years from now, I think, the interest rates are going to be, maybe, I'll say significantly higher.
They have to be.
It's hard to say how much,
Get
but
any lower than.
I would agree, and what I'm trying to figure out is what is going to be the cost of interest for us to delay issuing bonds or notes. If we issue the bonds and notes now and our interest rate's at 3%, and we wait 2 years and now it's up at 5%, the cost to the city becomes significant. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of my decision process as to how much more do we have to pay if we delay this. I mean, there is a cost for that, and it could be significant.
The other, and I agree with you, Rich, the other side is we have to decide whether or not the project is worthwhile funding,
Absolutely.
or not necessarily worthwhile. Can we afford to do it, and can we put it on the backs of the taxpayers?
Yeah.
How much can 20-some, what was you say, 21%? Did you use the number?
Well, 20, it goes about 20% if we go
20%
from
increase.
4.6 to,
I'm not quite sure I could vote for something like that.
Yeah.
Just on our percentage of it.
Mhm.
Even though I think we have some other issues going forward to take a look at to say, is there some way to offset that price, whether it's the sale of some of our other assets? Whether that makes sense or not, I don't know.
and part of the problem is, once you make that increase, it's
Yep.
really hard
It's
for
impossible.
it to go backward,
Oh, absolutely.
you know? So
We've heard
you're-
that before, haven't we?
Yep.
Sunset provisions.
But I don't think you want to keep going back every 2 years and raising it.
No, but
You suggested an alternative. What is your alternative outside of these three options?
You know, I guess I'm much more in favor of going up to 5 at this point. It seems like that's our only option. Staying where we're at is not viable. We have to at least go up to 5.0 to be able to fund some of these projects. Gosh, I'd much rather start there and do as much as we can with roads. I don't want to start borrowing for looking toward a public safety building that we don't really have a solid plan for. I'd rather see us take a small increase this year, reassess, see where it's gotten us, take another look next year.
because we have a blueprint to look at,
Right.
to say, these are the projects we talked about, whether or not are we able to financially fund them or not then?
But I understand what you're saying, Rich, about the cost of borrowing, and that needs to be factored in too, but I just think going up by 10, 15, 20%, if every municipality did that, folks would be pretty shocked at their property tax statements.
Well, we consider that the school is looking at building a new school and what the cost that's gonna be, plus our county, I don't know what they're planning on doing with the big increase they took in the library last year.
We can't ignore the fact that we have to run our business.
Absolutely.
And to sell the taxpayers short if they're not getting the services they think they deserve, then we need to do we need to take the next step. I'm not going to base my decision on whether or not the school district or the other identities on the tax bill are doing their business. We have to look out. I'm looking out at line item City of Hudson taxes.
I think, right now, when you look at it, whether you're at the 5 mil scenario or the 5.25 mil scenario that were laid out by Ellers, over the next 2 years, in order to kind of stay within that scenario, the difference in terms of issuing debt would be $4.5 million worth of debt or $5.3 million worth of debt. The next real impact may be those next 2 years. Yep. But, at least, based upon the projects that were identified, it would allow us to, with either of those, and, at that number, the difference of $800,000, where $800,000 is significant, there's really not a big difference. But, where the plan probably does kick in more would be in that next round, where Ellers had laid out, funding in, for 2013 to 2016 of $6.5 million for the one scenario and $11 million for the other scenario. And that's where in those next 2 years under the 5.25 mil scenario, you would have the significant change versus the 5 mil scenario.
But there's nothing stopping a slight increase next year.
No.
For the following, I'm just,
Well, I think if we issue debt, I don't think you want to go back in issuing debt every year.
right.
So,
Because it's what,
yeah, so I think,
$35,000
when we issue debt, that's almost going to lock in, that's going to layer that out on top of our existing debt.
For 2 years.
For 2 years. Well,
I mean, it's gonna-
yeah,
right.
for either 10 years or 20 years, but
Yep.
you're going to string a layer of repayment on top of
Right.
our existing debt.
but the issue is after we don't want to go back next year and issue another
Right.
one. Because I believe it's roughly $35,000 to issue a bond, whether it's
Right.
X percentage or however big it is. Well, what do you think?
I guess I'm leaning towards the 5.25, and the reason for that would be, I don't want to raise taxes on a continuing type basis where you raise it once and you have to go back and raise it again and make people face those increases and the uncertainty of it. I'd rather get it over with at one time, and the difference between 5 and 50 and 5.25 is $16, 100,000. So because of those reasons and because of the potential interest impact we may have by getting it over with, I'd be in favor of the 5.25, I guess. And it allows us to get some projects done.
Okay.
And I realize, Lori, what you said and the impact on the taxpayer, and I understand that, and I think I'd rather just have it come out one time and get it over with.
Is that a motion?
Sure. I thought Randy was going to make that motion, but I'll make that motion.
I'll second your motion.
To favor the 5.25 mil rate for bonds and notes for the capital projects.
I would agree with you too, that I think that's the route to go right now. And in 2 years, we take a look, or a year and a half, we take a look at whether or not, where we're at with our public safety building and decide whether or not we can afford to do that or what becomes available. If something happens with the county as far as the participation together, that $2 million, I think we had $2 million in for land acquisition, was it?
Yes, we did, in 2015.
Okay. So we're still, we could probably meet that if we had some partnership with the county. They own the land.
Yep.
And we might be able to work something out on that. So, again, that's in the future, and there's nothing solid, but we're talking about that.
I know there's some good projects on the table. I think it's
Too
too much
Okay.
to put, push at taxpayers and,
One of the things that, Laura, you said probably a year and a half ago when we were looking at stormwater utility,
uh-oh.
because it may come back and haunt you, is that what you're thinking? No, you said, we can only kick the can down the road so long, and I think a lot of these projects we've been talking about, and I think we need to get them done as best we can with, and I think this is a reasonable approach. It's somewhere in between. So, I know I'd said during our stormwater utility over my dead body that we'd ever have one, and we have one, and I'm still alive, so. That, I'll vote for this I-increase. Okay, any other questions, comments?
Did you want to call for a vote?
Yep. But I want to see if anybody had, before we voted,
Okay.
if anybody had anything else they wanted to say about it. Maybe I shouldn't vote. No. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, motion carries.
And then for next meeting, based upon that, I had the recommendation, at least for 2013, a debt issuance of $5.3 million to cover those projects. And what we'll do is we'll bring that forward with that listing of projects, unless somebody has an additional idea, at least bring those projects forward for 2013 funding.
Absolutely. But it has to go to council first
Correct.
to see if they'll.
And we'll do that at the next meeting.
Okay. Again, we're only going to talk about the 2013 projects,
Right,
and then we'll have a chance to review the next year's projects, even though we bonded for it.
correct.
Okay?
Then we can adjust those accordingly to use the funds within the proper time frame.
Is that reasonable for you folks?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move on to the next item. The issue is the amendment to our joint library agreement. The joint library has a provision for reimbursement to other libraries. The provision provides for the Hudson Area Joint Library to reimburse other libraries in St. Croix County for any shortfall between what they receive for library service from St. Croix County and the rural circulation funding that would have been received if no town participated in the Hudson Joint Library. Consequently, the Hudson Area Library has been making payments to River Falls, Roberts, and Somerset libraries for circulation to residents of the town of Hudson and St. Joe. Below is a summary of payments made over the last 3 years. 2011, $35,570. 2012, $52,121, and 2013, $34,488. If the joint library agreement can be amended by the unanimous approval of the governing bodies, amending the agreement would remove this provision, would increase funds available to the operation of our joint library. Neil, you want to add anything to that?
No, actually, I think maybe legal counsel might add, additional comments.
Oh, well, just exactly what you just heard, and you do have the opportunity or authority to amend. You'll need the approval of all the governing bodies of the municipalities, but there is no requirement under state law that the Hudson Area Joint Library make these payments. It was a function of the agreement only. Circumstances are different. The library's been in operation for 10 years, I think, almost, and so might be time to change that because the Hudson Area Joint Library.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
And
think,
funding.
I'm sorry, Laura, this is something that was probably a good thought at the time the library started 10 years ago, but since those 10 years have passed, this requirement has outgrown its use, and right now it's actually a very strong detriment to the Hudson Joint Library, and this can be amended without harming with any significance these other libraries that are included here. The service level, I guess is what I'm saying, will not be harmed if the Hudson Library does not reimburse these other libraries. Their service level will remain the same. Hudson Library service level may be increased slightly because of the available funds. And the Hudson Joint Library does need funds.
So correct me if I'm wrong, this gap in funding, is it not completely covered now by St. Croix County's new funding mechanism?
You'd
It
have
seems
to
like
ask.
we're over, seems like we're,
I think you really have,
Right.
you have to, what ends up happening here is our library is getting money for circulation to residents of the towns or of other communities that don't have libraries. With this provision, we are in turn reimbursing some of the other libraries. We're almost acting in the same manner as the county is in paying out money that, our taxpayers have paid us. We're paying it out and reimbursing these other libraries because they're circulating books to residents of the towns of Hudson and the town of St. Joseph.
We were acting as a mini county.
Yeah, we're acting as a mini county would be
And
a
it-
good way to
we
it
describe
get
may
it.
nothing
have been
back.
to try to ease the transition,
sure.
Right.
and at the time, it did require county approval, plus the county percentage rate at that time was lower on reimbursement,
But
so.
when you look at the state funding, right, that River Falls Library gets,
Well, the state funding for the city versus us, yes,
it's enormous.
2.1 million.
Yeah.
You mean
State-
shared revenue?
Shared revenue, but some of that I would presume
Well,
can
I
go
would guess
toward
go toward-
libraries.
And what we're trying to do here is give them plenty of notice. This is for next year. We've already paid this year.
Yeah, generally it's paid in January.
Yep. So we're trying to give them notice for their budgeting purposes that they won't feel we just won't rip the rug from underneath them. And if we agree to this tonight, and this money will go directly to our library, I mean, we'll keep the
We'll
money.
keep it, yeah.
We'll
Right.
keep it. It won't go direct.
Right.
We'll keep it, rather than sending it out.
Doesn't come out of the operating funds.
That's correct. And
So-
so,
I'm sorry, is
Go
it
ahead.
based on 2013 circulation numbers?
What we would be saving here is what we would pay out to those other libraries in 2014 would be based upon 2012 circulation and cost per circulation.
Okay. I mean, there's no pattern to,
no.
Well,
Well,
I
a
think
lot
the
of it
reason-
has to do with how many people use the library.
And the pattern here, the reason it jumped up to 52,000, because there's a 2-year lag. Well, in 2010, our library was closed.
closed.
Okay, so more people went to the other libraries, which is why you had that bump in 2012, but then it came down again to
Right.
quote the norm in 2013.
Are our partners approving this as well
Well, we have to bring it forward to them.
after
They,
we do it?
they like the idea, they are in the process, and I can't speak for them, they're going to send letters back to rescind of the Joint Library Board. I think they're going to recommend that, but I don't know that for a fact. They're gonna have it on their agenda. Their letters need to be to us by the 31st of August, or the 30th of August. And with the recent law change that funding has to be an average of the last 3 years, we're not forced into a situation where we have to participate in the county program, which was at 100% level. We won't have to participate, and our residents won't get that tax on them this year.
Yeah, well, we thought we had to start somewhere. I mean,
Yep.
the partners need to start somewhere, and so I thought if the council does end up approving this, letters could go out to the member municipalities from Mayor Burchell saying the council approved this, we would like you to put it on your agenda and state the reasons why, and maybe provide them with the issue sheet so they understand what the situation is.
Right, and knowing that, both towns and the village, their next meeting is in the beginning of August.
Yeah.
If we take action now, it almost prompts them, 2 weeks from now, or, 2-3 weeks from now to take similar action.
Stan in Village of North Hudson has put it on their agenda for August 6th.
Oh, already?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'd move that we take this recommendation to amend the joint library agreement and remove the provision of the increased funds. Is that
It'd be basically
how
be
you want it?
deleting
Payments.
paragraph 7 of the joint requiring reimbursement to other
I
libraries.
don't have that in front of me.
Yeah, I've got it.
So basically, we're going to stop payment to these.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? I think I should probably, I'll give the River Falls a call, just to tell them that we're in the process, so that, again, we don't want it, we're not trying to surprise them or give them, big. It's $20,000 out of their budget.
Mhm.
Somerset's 8, and we'll send letters to all of them. Again, provided that the other folks will go along with this, because it takes unanimous
Yes.
consent to do this, which I don't see any problem being able to get more money for our library. We need it.
So these are the only 3 that we currently reimburse
Correct.
to. So if
That's
someone goes
correct.
to Baldwin,
At least Baldwin has not submitted for reimbursement.
Well, we're going to eliminate the whole paragraph so that we don't do that anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there anything else for future agenda items that you'd like to talk about? Yes, sir.
We're gonna have some expenses coming forward for the storm, sand at the beach, some tree removals that aren't in the budget. So what I'll probably do is move it, so we can get the bills paid, move to contingency, and then we'll bring back, once we have better numbers, then we'll bring back and we'll have to find sources, whether you leave it out of contingency or we find some other sources. But in the interim, just get the budget adjustments made so they can get the bills paid.
Do we want to, Tom had just sent me an email on the potential cost for cleanup. Are you comfortable with those numbers yet, or not? The numbers that you just sent me about an hour ago?
I think they're,
Again, it's not,
fairly, forward.
so basically, and I believe this is just from Public Works?
Yeah, it didn't include any hours or overtime for the labor, that was just, estimates for the damage and tree removal and things like that.
$272,300. And I believe we can get up to 80% reimbursement from.
Only for certain things. I
Okay.
mean, a lot depends upon the program.
Okay,
The state has a program where we could be reimbursed up to 80%, but that's for debris removal, protective services, and then road repairs.
okay.
I believe on Wednesday, there is going to be a FEMA representative here because potentially, I think the state is looking at having this declared a federal disaster, and if it's a federal disaster, there may be additional funding available. So, right now, it's very, very difficult to tell what sort of recovery or reimbursement might come to us.
None of this, have we done anything with the fire?
Agenda?
Yep. But I'm from the standpoint of updating information. We haven't had any fire update as far as cost. I think we should look at that, and police. Correct?
They have been marking their time cards with equipment, so we are in the process of capturing that. At least particularly for police overtime for the first pay period, we have that. Fire, I know they have submitted some information to Kim,
Okay.
EB, and so the meeting on Wednesday will be to try to, coordinate, identify what projects and what costs we have incurred and what costs we anticipate incurring.
Okay. Thanks for the update. Anything else? We should have that on for next meeting, just to see where we're at. Okay? If there's nothing else, move for adjournment.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We're adjourned.